Betrayal is the one sin even the most hardened criminals struggle to forgive, and when it comes from the very top, it destroys everything. This is the story of Butch Crouch, a man who rose to power as president of the Cleveland chapter of the Hells Angels, only to destroy the brotherhood he once ruled. Butch wasn't just another biker. He was a wild man, leading one of the most violent and feared chapters in the gang's history. But behind his ruthless exterior, something was developing a crack in his loyalty that no one saw coming. What led this feared leader to turn on his own? Butch Crouch, the rise of a Hells Angels leader. Butch Crouch wasn't born to legendary status, but he sure embraced it with open arms. A Cleveland native, Crouch had a rebellious streak from a young age, drawn to danger and a sense of freedom that only the outlaw life could offer. In the 1960s, during the cultural swirling around rock and roll, Vietnam protests, and a growing fascination with the underground, Butch found himself drawn to the leather-suited bikers who were blazing through town. He joined the Hells Angels in the late 60s, quickly proving he was more than just another recruit. Butch's charisma, street smarts, and brutal efficiency in enforcing the gang's code earned him the respect and fear of his fellow members. By the time he became the president of the Cleveland chapter, he had transformed himself into a figure of ruthless power, someone who thrived in a world of drugs, violence, and loyalty that ran deep. For Butch, the Hells Angels were more than a gang. They were family, power, and purpose. Little did anyone know that the same man who climbed to the top with unwavering loyalty would later become the ultimate symbol of betrayal. The bombing capital of America, Cleveland's era of terror. Cleveland wasn't just a city under Butch Crouch's leadership, it was a battleground. In the 1970s, under his command, the Cleveland chapter of the Hells Angels earned the chilling nickname, Bombing Capital of America. It wasn't an exaggeration. During one particularly violent year, the Hells Angels carried out 37 bombings, using explosives to eliminate rivals, intimidate witnesses, and send a loud, fiery message to anyone who dared oppose them. Butch Crouch had turned his chapter into a feared criminal empire, one that ruled the streets with an iron fist and an obsession for destruction. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the community, not just physically, but emotionally. People lived in constant fear, unsure of when or where the next attack would come. While the bombings were strategic in their motives, they also showed how far Butch and his crew were willing to go to establish their power. It wasn't just about crime anymore, it was about creating a legacy of terror. For Butch, the bombings were a demonstration of his chapter's power. For Cleveland, they were a nightmare that left scars far deeper than the rubble could show. The Godfather effect. When fiction inspired reality, locked away behind prison walls, Butch Crouch found unexpected inspiration in a fictional story, Mario Puzo's The Godfather. The novel, which glorified the inner workings of a mafia family, became something of a manual for Butch and his fellow Hells Angels. They began to see themselves not just as bikers, but as an organized crime syndicate with the potential for enormous power. The mafia-inspired structure quickly took shape, with strict rules, loyalty oaths, and rituals that mirrored those of the Corleone family. Butch and his crew embraced the idea of operating with precision, discipline, and control. The idea of family first was deeply connected, but it also came with its own set of complications. Punishments for disloyalty became more severe, and the gang's actions became more calculated and evil. The Godfather mentality elevated the Hells Angels from a group of unruly bikers to a highly organized and dangerous criminal enterprise. It's almost fascinating how fiction bled into reality, turning Butch's chapter into something even more menacing. While the novel was a story of loyalty, power, and betrayal, for Butch, it became an outline for running his empire, a blueprint that would ultimately lead to his own betrayal and downfall. Betrayal and testimony, the fall of a brotherhood. When Butch Crouch decided to turn informant, it wasn't just a betrayal, it was an earthquake that shook the Hells Angels to their core. The man who had once led the Cleveland chapter with an iron fist now became the government's most valuable asset in their mission to break up the gang. Butch's testimony led to over 100 arrests and crippled the Hells Angels' operations, with 30% of their criminal enterprises nationwide brought to a shutdown. For Butch, it was framed as a moment of redemption.
It's no secret that the Hells Angels are an incredibly vicious organization.
But for the gang,
but in its 70 years of
existence,
there's really
loyalty
one guy that's
the patch you get when you kill people.
And Butch had shattered that trust
they're
in the
called
most
the filthy.
public and devastating way. The fallout was brutal. Members who were once his brothers pledged to take revenge, and Butch was forced into hiding, living with the constant threat of being punished. His decision to testify raised questions that continue to exist today. Was it an act of courage or an act of weakness? Redemption or selfishness? For Butch, it may have been all of those things, but one thing is certain: his betrayal forever changed the Hells Angels, both in how they operated and in how they viewed each other. Legacy of fear and paranoia. A brotherhood transformed. Butch Crouch's betrayal didn't just destroy lives, it changed the Hells Angels from the inside out. In the aftermath of his testimony, paranoia gripped the gang like a curse. Trust, once the foundation of their brotherhood, was replaced by suspicion and fear. Members began watching each other more closely, questioning loyalties, and conducting even more secretive meetings. The gang became harder to infiltrate, more careful in their dealings, and far more ruthless in punishing those they considered disloyal. While this shift made them a far stronger organization, it also created cracks in their foundation. The brotherhood that had once defined the Hells Angels was now overshadowed by an atmosphere of mistrust. Butch's betrayal was a wake-up call, forcing the gang to adapt to a world where even their closest allies could turn against them. It's a haunting reminder of the fragility of loyalty in a life built on violence and crime. Butch's actions, whether seen as a necessary evil or an unforgivable act, left a lasting legacy. The Hells Angels became a more secretive and sophisticated operation, but they also became a group haunted by the ghosts of their past, a brotherhood forever looking over its shoulder. From outlaws to a global empire, the Hells Angels today. Despite the chaos and betrayal of the 1970s, the Hells Angels didn't just survive, they thrived. Today, the gang operates in 59 countries with chapters spanning the globe and a reputation that still strikes fear into the hearts of many. Butch Crouch's story, though a dark chapter in their history, played a significant role in shaping the Hells Angels into what they are now. His betrayal forced the gang to evolve, adopting new strategies and structures to protect themselves from both internal and external threats. They became more calculated, more secretive, and far more organized. However, the questions surrounding Butch's actions remain unanswered. Was he a coward who abandoned his brothers, or was he a man trying to right the wrongs of his past? The answer is complicated, much like the Hells Angels themselves. Their transformation into a global powerhouse reflects both their resilience and their ability to adapt in the face of hardship. Butch Crouch's story is one of power, destruction, and betrayal, a man who built his chapter into a criminal empire only to tear it apart with one fateful decision. His testimony against the Hells Angels shook the gang to its core, forcing them to adapt, evolve, and forever question their own. For some, Butch is a symbol of redemption, a man who turned against the darkness he once embraced. For others, he's the ultimate traitor, a man who sold out his brothers for his own survival. Whatever the perspective, his actions forever changed the Hells Angels, transforming them from reckless outlaws to a global criminal force.